Story RH, the podcast that makes a long story short.
Welcome to all.
History is made of stories.
In this episode, we'll be talking about the 3 keys required to make data speak in human resources.
The HR field is no safer than any other from hasty or inappropriate interpretation. When you pair prejudices and ridiculous reasoning with a perfectible understanding of the basic principles of statistics, you find yourself with an explosive cocktail.
We've all seen plenty of barely plausible, yet sensationalist studies. Did you know that baldness can be a business advantage according to a study led by the Wharton School of Business? And according to the ladders, each additional letter in your first name results in a loss of $3,600 in earnings per year.
The phenomenon is as old as time itself, which is why it's so important to avoid hasty interpretations and biases. 3 keys to make data speak in HR. What's the story?
Let's take an example: inflation and purchasing power. God knows that the topic brings together quite a few biases and has been subjected to plenty of oversimplifications. HR professionals who handle salary negotiations should look more closely into it, if only to better understand the concept of inflation.
But what we're talking about here is the ability to interpret facts and data. Interpreting is really about successfully exercising discernment. You have to understand what it means before you can make it speak.
If we're honest with ourselves, we know that data doesn't make us smart. That said, making it speak correctly does help us make smart decisions.
A person's intelligence becomes clear based on what they do with what they know. As French poet Paul Valéry said,
So, it's easy to understand that the first skill required is the ability to analyze data, which demands a certain degree of knowledge on the topic, on data and their statistical processing.
it's a complex field, so complex that even specialists have a hard time providing a definition. For example, in 1935, statistician Walter Wilcox listed over 100.
But that is still the starting point: understanding data, what it represents and how it was compiled.
Yes, for example, a variable as seemingly simple as working time can include unequal content in different countries, or even from one subsidiary to the next. It's not enough to have the data and process it. You have to truly understand it.
Right, you have to understand how it was produced, where the aggregate data came from, to make that sure you're not comparing apples and oranges, the codification of variables, etc.
The second key to properly analyzing HR data is professional expertise, without which you cannot hope to produce a meaningful analysis of observed phenomena.
In other words, you have to be able to separate meaningful information from statistical artifacts. An understanding of professional practices is what allows an analyst to determine what a result really means.
And it's precisely professional experience that teaches the analyst where to look and how to interpret what they find.
Lastly, the third key is more about a professional culture. In other words, beyond professional expertise per se, it's about understanding what purpose the data serves, the big picture it's a part of, but also the collection of constraints that it's exposed to.
With it, you have a better chance of understanding the external factors likely to explain any given fact.
It's about getting back to simple underlying principles that are easy to understand but which we sometimes lose sight of when we get lost in overly technical analyses.
You could take the collection of constraints that impact a business or a role in a process, which explain individual behaviors, or even think of structural principles like risk itself, for example.
As you can see, making data speak, in order to eventually be in a position to make smart decisions regarding HR situations, is about more than obtaining the data and developing a few basic skills in statistics.
To recap, making data speak is a matter of exercising discernment to make relevant decisions. There are 3 keys to doing this. 1. A culture of data and data analysis. 2. Professional expertise in the field being studied. And 3. A professional culture that goes beyond expertise to understand the systems of constraints that structure the object being studied. Is that right?
Exactly right. Way to make a long story short.
Story RH, the podcast that makes a long story short.